Ambassador, thank you very much, and to all the dignitaries, thank you. Thank you for everyone for coming out tonight. A few groups I want to highlight. We don't get much sort of recognition, but my Northern Ireland diaspora friends are all here. Yeah, Jim Clerk and Jim. Jason, yeah. We're small, but we're noisy. Also, my KPMG partners and colleagues who are here support you. I'm still not sure why you're not out working, billing time, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. But no, thank you again. Thank you and congratulations to the other Wall Street 50 honorees. You know, you read through the bios and they're truly inspired, and I'm humbled to be part of that group. So, you know, congratulations to you. And just maybe echo what Alan was saying to Neil and Trish about 30 years of the Irish American magazine. You know, I think I speak for a lot of us in the room. I know I do. Every morning I wake up to take a look at Irish Central to see what's going on. I've learned a lot about redheads. Apparently, there's 10 good things about being a redhead, which I learned on Irish Central. But and the magazine, every time it comes out, Trish, the stories, you're absolutely right. But I used to think everything in Irish America was true till I started reading what you wrote about me. And now the whole credibility of the magazine. But, you know, to have 30 years, the competitive industry and space you're in with multimedia, digital, and the success that you've had, it is inspirational. And so congratulations on 30 great years. You know, any of us who've been to these public speaking classes say you should always start your speech with a joke. It makes you relax. It relaxes, everybody in the room. You get a bond and stuff, which is really helpful for an accountant because we're really because nobody expects us to be funny, right? In fact, they expect us to be really boring. So if we tell a joke, no matter how bad it is or mildly amusing, everybody's going to laugh. See? So, I do want to take a little bit more time to talk about the Wall Street 50. I think, as Anne said, since the 17th century, financial service finance have been the backbone of the economy of this great city. And the role of the Irish and Irish Americans has been critical to that and the success through various crashes, through the recent Great Recession that we have worked through. Seeing the Irish and what they have done is, for me, it makes me very proud and inspired. But I think even the influence has gone broader than that. I have no doubt that the speed of the recovery of the Irish economy from what happened in 2007, 2008 would not have happened without the support and the courage of Irish and Irish Americans on Wall Street to support that. I think the Irish government is commended for what's happening and how quickly the economy is coming back. But I think the friends on Wall Street have really helped that. And again, I'm proud to be part of that. Mary and I were coming over in the taxi over, and I said, Mary, I said, in your wildest dreams, would you have ever seen me, being part of the Wall Street 50, being in, the Metropolitan Club, being the keynote speaker? And she looked at me and said, the only way a Derry woman could is, I hate to tell you, Shaun, you're not in my wildest dreams. Don't encourage her. No, but I want to, none of us would be where we are without the support of our families, spouses, significant others. And clearly, I would not be where I am without Mary and the whole family and what they have done. It's interesting, we have moved. I think we've moved house 14 times. We've had 7 moves from different cities. And Mary's been there because I've tended to schedule meetings around the time that the movers were supposed to come. I think there was one time I did say I was going to be there, and she said, "Don't bother, we get on best when you're not here." But one of the moves in 2001, we'd been living in San Francisco, and our kids were all swimmers, and we were living out in East Bay. We had outdoor pool. We were in the hills in Contra Costa County in the Bay Area. It was fabulous. And the firm asked me would I move to Chicago. So I said, Mary's not going to buy this. So I said, look, they've asked if I would move to Chicago. She says, okay, we'll go take a look. So we go house hunting in Chicago in January 2001. And so if you remember, 2001 January, Chicago had just suffered one of the biggest blizzards they'd ever. So we were going house hunting on the North Shore of Chicago. First time I'd ever gone house hunting where they show you photographs of what the garden looks like in the summer, right? Because you see all the snow and this. So, and we were looking at that. It was a nice house, and we were deciding, with the kids, if you live in the Midwest, you get a swimming pool for like the month and a half. You can actually use it during the year. So we go out onto the back porch of this house, and in the house next door in the back garden was all this like wooden scaffolding and going on in the backyard. And the realtor was with us, and Mary turned to the realtor and goes, "Oh, are they putting in a swimming pool?" And the realtor just laughed, said, "No, that's their ice rink." Because any of you lived in the Midwest, they put the frames, they frame it, and the kids play ice hockey in the back. So I said, look, there's no way we're moving to Chicago. But we moved the kids. It was a great city with a great, 5 years there before we moved to New York. But again, our 4 children who moved with us, they've been so supportive. And I think every one of the Wall Street 50 honorees know the support that they have received from their families. And I think this is as much a recognition of the support that we get as for honorees. And I think we should honor any of the spouses, partners. My sort of journey to this podium is probably no different from many of you in this room. And as Anne said, I grew up in a close-knit community in West Belfast in the 70s, interesting times. And we had a family that was very focused on education, hard work, integrity, doing the right thing, sharing, giving back to the communities. And I don't think that was any different from the communities that many of us grew up in Ireland. I think have particularly in the financial services sector, has really held us good stead. Integrity. I always say, if my grandmother saw what I do, would she be happy, or would she be not so happy? And I never wanted my grandmother not to be happy. It was not a good thing. But I think that put us in good stead. I'm not going to bore you on the story of how a short, spotty kid from West Belfast became a short, baldy accountant in New York. I have plenty of other things I can bore you with. I don't need to bore you with that. But I think I will talk about some of those characteristics that I think have framed who we are as part of our DNA and what has helped us to be successful in financial services. And, just to do, I sort of Googled, have you ever Googled characteristics of the Irish? It's really interesting. When you get past the red hair and the freckles and looking like Liam Neeson, you get to some. And we have strengths and weaknesses. And it's interesting, I read once that, your weaknesses are your strengths overused. And one of the things that, the strengths of the Irish is, we're diplomats, we build consensus, but and this was, when I Googled it, it said, but they're also notoriously indirect. We hate saying no to people's face. We will never criticize unless you're really successful. Then we're going like, well, where did they really get the money from? But a whole list, we're talkative, we're inquisitive, we're humble most of the time. We put a lot of faith in family and say we do the right thing. But I thought I would pick 3 that maybe talk a little bit of what I felt have helped me as I've grown personally and professionally, and how I think growing up in Ireland and Belfast sort of helped with those. There's sense of humour. I think there's our resilience, and I think finally our teams, how we like to play in teams and how we're collaborative. And the sense of humour, I think I got my sense of humour from my father. My father left school at 16. He was one of 9. Grew up in the Falls Road in Belfast. Had to leave school. Very, very intelligent man. Probably today, with the opportunities, would have been an engineer or architect, but he had to go work in the building industry. But But he had this Belfast sense of humour. It's sort of, quick fire, mischievous, self-depreciating. But it was also really bad, right? For those of you that are old enough, think Frank Carson, right? That was my father. And I give you two examples. He would come in these jokes, really, joke. The first I always remember, he talked about a pet shop in Belfast. He said, kid goes into the pet shop in Belfast, goes, "Mister, I want to buy a wasp." And the guy, "We don't sell wasps." He says, "We got a load of them in the window." You have to grow up in Belfast, we used to have a lot of wasps. But he would laugh, and he had heard it before, so he'd be laughing, and then he'd come back really quick with a follow-up because he felt, well, he didn't like that one. And it was invariably linked to the troubles. So the follow-up would go, 2 weeks later, the same pet shop, guy runs in, puts a bomb on the counter and said, "You've got 10 minutes to get out." And the little boy goes, "What about the tortoises?" Look, it's so bad. But I think they helped, that sort of humor. I think in many is, you're thinking of all the Nordies get it. Yeah. That's close enough. So I think that helped us. The same thing with, I think the broader arts and culture. I think in the article, Trish, I talked about how I remember in the 70s going to the Ulster Hall in Belfast and seeing Rory Gallagher and Christy Moore and Planksty and going to see the Undertones in the Whitlow Hall. I remember going to an Undertones concert in the Whitlow Hall and there was a bomb scare. And we all went outside the Queen's Union, and then an hour later we went back in when it was cleared and they picked up and played. That sort of, that culture brought the community together. Similarly, going to see a Brian Friel play in the Lyric Theatre in Belfast. And I think it helped define who we are and it gave us something to be proud of. And that's one of the reasons I'm such a big supporter of the Irish Arts Centre here in New York. I think it helps build our brand, it helps bring our community together, and I think it really helps, define who we are. And we've had some great cultural ambassadors over the years from, Val Morrison from Belfast and Riverdance and all of that. So I think it really helped us. Resilient and adaptable. Origin of the species, Charles Darwin. What was it? Charles Darwin concluded, it's survival of the... Oh, come on, help me here. Right? Fittest. Yeah, you're still awake back there. Actually, when they look at it, it wasn't survival of the fittest, it was survival of the most adaptable. And I think as we look at the changes that we have gone through, even here, I joke all the once-in-a-lifetime events that I've seen in the 16 years since I came back to the States. We had .com, I was in the West Coast for the .com bust, 9/11, the financial crisis, what we're seeing. Those things are coming, and the Irish have that resilience and the way to bounce back, and we've seen that in Ireland over the years. And I think it's also linked, to that entrepreneurial spirit that we have. I remember my grandfather died when I was 1, so I never got to know him. But he worked in Harland and Wolff in the shipyard. And one of the few Catholics who worked in the shipyard in the 1900s. He was a pipe fitter and coverer in Harland and Wolff shipyard. And my father told me he worked on building the Titanic. Now, I thought that was really great till, actually, when you talk to a lot of people, everybody who worked in Harland and Wolff at that time claimed they worked on the Titanic, even if they didn't. But I think he did. And I remember a few years ago going back with, actually, Andrea and Gary, who had an Invest Northern Ireland trip back to try, looking to attract investment back into Belfast. And Mike Bloomberg had come over on the same trip, and they'd given him a tour of the redevelopment area in Belfast, which many know is the Titanic Quarter, around near the old shipyard. And we've got some great financial services companies there, Liberty Mutual, Citi. It's a great, it's really great to go back and see them. And so Mike, they're asking Mike to say a few words, and Mike Bloomberg goes, said, only in Ireland would you name your redevelopment area after the Titanic. So he does speak. So quick, and I can't remember who the Lord Mayor of Belfast had. I do remember, I'm just not going to say it. Quick, he said, well, thank you, Mayor Bloomberg, for your good comments. Just so you know, the Titanic was fine when it left Belfast. but I think that, and if you ever go back, and Alice knows, you go back and see the Titanic Museum and Titanic in Belfast, it is unbelievable. And not just about the shipbuilding, it shows, Belfast from the days of linen and rope works, and like it was one of the major industrial cities of the world at that time. And that entrepreneurial spirit is still there. And I think I was able to go back again a few years ago and see the young tech startups that have spun out of many of those U.S. companies that I talked about. And I think it's that it bodes well for the future. It's one of the reasons I've been so active in the American Ireland Fund. I think that I've seen that ability to generate economic activity is what's going to really solidify the peace process. When people have jobs and they see a future for their families and education, they tend not to be wanting to shoot the other guy. And I think that collaboration and teamwork, you'll notice that it's actually more than three, but they always say have three things. So I put one in, then I add a few more in. So I'm not that good an accountant. But I think the collaboration and teamwork, it's who we are, and it's probably linked to our sense of humor and our ability to get on with people. But I don't think there's ever been a time where those skills of being able to work as part of a team, to be collaborative, will be more important. And I look at that. I remember going. My grandmother's house was a two-bedroom terraced house in the Falls Road where she raised the 9 children in the shadow of Ross's Mill, one of the big linen mills. And I remember going to wakes there and how the whole community would get around, making the sandwiches, getting the beer in and all of that. And I think that's in our DNA. And if you look at the millennials coming out now and what they want to be part of teams, they want to collaborate, they don't want to command and control. And I think that that ability that we have, when we look at what we're going to be facing, the change, so you take our ability to be adaptable, resilient, be collaborative, all of the disruption, all the technology is going to appear. I think we're very well positioned, particularly in financial services. And I think, we tend to do better than teams. And I know a lot of us talking about the Rugby World Cup coming up, and, the team does. So on that, questions, just make sure you're still all awake. What great sporting event took place on 18th of June, 1994? Ireland Little League Giants Stadium. June, Saturday night. Unbelievable. The great Italian team. They had Franco Baresi, they had Roberto Baggio, they had Paolo Maldini. We had Terry Phelan, Andy Townsend, Ray Houghton, managed by Jack Charlton. We actually had a few Irish people on the team too. Right? We had Roy Keane. Do you remember it? Saturday night, Ray Houghton scored the goal, 11 minutes, hung out for the rest of the game. It was good. How many of you were at the match? Anybody here at the match? Yeah.
And Italy won the World Cup that year.
Italy won the World Cup, beating Brazil on penalties. I always wondered, well, if they had won it and we had beaten them, did that mean that we could have got the World Cup? The way things go in the World Cup now, that's probably not beyond brilliant, right? We probably had to beat Qatar or something like that. But anyway. But those of you who weren't there probably remember vividly where you were. I remember vividly where it was. I was invited to watch it at the home of one of my partners. I was living in Belfast at the time, Jim Orme. Jim Orme was a County Antrim Presbyterian, lived on a farm near Lough Neagh. And Jim invited me out. Jim was a fervent Northern Ireland supporter. So there was a bit of me thinking, Jim's probably inviting me out there because he wants to see the Republic get beat, which was Jim was not like it, because he hated Italy more than he hated the Republic of Ireland team. And that stemmed from the fact that his team was Glentoran. And some of the old guys remember years and years ago, before they had all these qualifying for the Champions League, there was a chance that the league champions of Northern Ireland could play the champions of Italy. And we did. Glentoran played Inter Milan, got hammered. And from that day, Jim was a fervent anti-Italian, and he was just home. But actually, the reason why I invited, 1994 was a particularly challenging year for me. My father earlier that year had an aortal aneurysm, and any of you know, like the survival rate is less than 1%. He should have been dead, but he survived, and it was due primarily to the skills of the surgeons and the medical staff at Royal Victoria Hospital, Belfast. He should have been dead. He spent the whole time in intensive care. He spent probably about 6 to 9 months eventually. Lived life. He passed away 7 years ago, so he had, had a long life after that. And we had, many of you have had family members who have gone through health like that and been in intensive care. You're always on edge. You're waiting. I think we had numbers of phone calls where get the family around, Joe's not going to make it. And you get around, and like the stubborn Belfast money was, he pulled through, so we had to send everybody back, and then it all. So we watched the game. It was great. Republic won. We celebrated. We're back, and then we're back at home. And Mary was expecting our son Timothy. He turns 21 in a couple of days' time. So Mary was expecting Timothy. So that was stressful. And Jim had reached out, knew that was going to watch the game at his house would have been a good outlet. So we're back home, and the phone rings at 1 o'clock. Many of you know, phone rings at 1 o'clock. It tends not to be a good thing. I don't know if one of the things, when I was back in Belfast, we were the receivers to the Europa, and we got numerous phone calls at 1 o'clock telling us, yeah, it's been bombed again, so you get out. So you learn that a phone call at 1 o'clock is not a good thing. So the phone, and I picked it up, it was Annie McGuire, who was the lead nurse in the intensive care. And again, any of you have had relatives in you get to know the staff really well because they have to make those calls when they ring. So I said, oh, Annie, well, how's my dad doing? He said, well, I just want to let you know we've moved him from intensive care into the high dependency unit. I said, oh gosh, I didn't know he was improving. I was able to. Well, he's not improving. He's not getting worse. He's not improving. We need to move him. I said, well, why is that? He said, well, we've had an incident. We need the beds. And the incident they were referring to, remember, was the Heights Bar in Loughin Island. It became the World Cup massacre. 6 people killed, 5 seriously injured. They needed the beds in the intensive care unit. And I remember looking back on that and reflecting. And I think it was something Pope Francis made. I think one of the themes of what he talked about was, you look at the immigrants, you look at a lot of things. These are real people. And when you get a call and you realize these are real people. And I remember thinking of how hard those medical staff had worked to keep my father alive. And there were people that went in and like that, had no value of life and would take it away. And every time I see, the bumps in the road that we're seeing at the minute in terms of the peace process, you look back at that and we can never go back and we won't go back to that. Yep. And one of my heroes here is Seamus Heaney. And as you know, Seamus Heaney's from Derry, County Derry, Nobel Prize winner. My wife also tells me that the other Nobel Prize winner, John Hume, is also from Derry. Both of them went to St. Columb's College, where Mary's brothers went. So he keeps telling me, Shaun, my brothers went to school where 2 Nobel Prize winners went to. I said, well, they don't have Nobel Prizes. And she said, well, you don't either. So you can see how the arguments go in the Kelly household. You never get the last word in. But I was lucky enough to meet Seamus Heaney several times. The last time I met him, shortly before he died, was in Glucksman House here at NYU. And we had a fabulous conversation. Such a humble man, such an intelligent man. And we talked a range of things. He was very interested in the financial markets, what I recommend. And I told him, I'm an accountant. I can't tell you, I have to be independent. But we were good. He then also told me, we had a discussion about Gaelic football, and he kept saying, Derry, Sean's much better at football county than Antrim, and we argued. And he said, Shaun, I don't need to be a Nobel Prize winner to tell you Derry is better than Antrim. So he agreed, a big loss when he passed. And a few weeks ago, Neil did a fabulous piece, I don't know if you saw on Irish Central, about Seamus Heaney's grave. His family, a few weeks back, just before the 2nd anniversary of his passing, have erected a gravestone in the graveyard in Balahi, County Derry. The most humble, for a Nobel Peace Prize, the most humble grave. And on that is a quote from one of his poems. It's, walk on air against your better judgment. I'm accountant. I'm going, well, that sounds really good, but I'm not quite sure what it means. But Neil then went on to quote from an interview that Seamus had done with the Crimson Review at Harvard, where he explained about, this is an extract from one of his poems, The Gravel Walks, which is about heavy work, and he explained what he meant. And he talked about growing up in Northern Ireland. He said, you grew up in Northern Ireland, you're cautious, you're vigilant just because of, the environment that you grew up in. And he said that impacted his poetry early on. He was said, I felt very defensive. I felt more on the ground than in the air. And then as I gained confidence and realized it was okay, I had been wedded in the matter of fact, but it was okay to seek the marvelous. I think, Neil, you sort of added your own commentary around, you thought part of what drove that was his astonishment that, against the better judgment of many, the peace process in Northern Ireland had been successful, and that had encouraged Seamus to write those words, and was encouraging us to not be afraid to dream, to be ambitious, to go after those, And I think not just, and I hope our politicians and those looking at peace will, be courageous, will aspire, will take chances, because I think we deserve that, and the people of Northern Ireland deserve it. And I think us in our, professional and, personal careers and lives, we shouldn't be, and particularly in this city, in this country with so many opportunities, we should be ambitious, we shouldn't be afraid, and we should take risks. So, Seamus has left us, I think, with a great reminder of it's okay to dream, and it's okay to seek the marvelous. So I'm now going to use the two words I know you've been waiting for. In conclusion. Again, I do want to congratulate all the honorees. It's a privilege and an honor to be part of. As you read the stories, it's just terrific. It makes you proud to be Irish. It makes you proud to be Irish American. It makes you proud to be Irish American on Wall Street. So again, congratulations to you all. And finally, Trish and Neil, congratulations on 30 years. It's tremendous. I was going to say here's to the next 30 years, but I heard Tricia saying here's to the next 100. So here's the next 100. Thank you.